In the first 100 or so pages of Digital Detroit, Jeff Rice explains that understanding meaning in a place, in a networked sense, is based on understanding the idea of the place according to movement, and not according to pre-recorded topos, in the Aristotelian sense. Instead of describing the different categories, no matter how richly, Rice advocates that we understand spaces as being relational and constantly moving. Further, we should understand that our experiences with space, or place, are inherently subjective. One of the keys, Rice explains, in networked production is to avoid treating the building like a space that merely holds meanings for temporary periods of time. One must engage the meanings for their rhetorical potential, like their folksonomy. It allows classification. Rice argues that even the most complete history of a building may not be complete, as it should be when it is not placed within the context of networks, meaning, or spaces. This kind of networked understanding of space is the ultimate goal that Rice lays out for the book Digital Detroit. Descriptions and histories, no matter how complete, are still too much of a container which functions to preserve some kinds of memories, but also to exclude other kinds of memories. Rice argues that the discussion, in the case of the Maccabees, is larger than the topos outlined in education. Though the DPS has since moved from the Maccabees' physical location, it is still part of the building's narrative. In order to create a folksonomic map, Rice calls in the idea that he once worked in the space and compares it to his work in the Digital Literacy Initiative. This initiative, very much unlike Muriel's history of Detroit's education, was about making technological education relevant in students' lives. These subjective meanings have importance to Rice, and duly inform the ways that he comes to understand and appreciate spaces and places. In discussing the different categories of thought that are prominent in the Maccabees, Rice justifies the claim by noting Aristotle's claim that categories maintain relationships to being. In other words, categories and being have necessary connections. One can imagine space's physicality through its virtuality, and in particular of the way this virtual space collects and assembles a variety of artifacts into a usable surface. And regardless of what essential qualities a building may hold, there is more to it than just the building's essence. Rice maintains that mobility of the space, or mobility of the features of the space, are what gives the space meaning, not its essence. Instead, the meaning is understood relationally, and necessarily differently from one person to another, as befits their individual and subjective experience. The chapter on Maccabees ends with Rice noting that the Maccabees leave open a lot more possibilities than he had initially thought. Space is a platform that can be interfaced with to build a tremendous array of different meanings relevant or not relevant to the space. The interactions we have with space are rhetorical. The action of encountering a space and creating meanings is an inventive act. This happens over and over again, in new spaces and in old spaces. Some experiences are greater than others. Undoubtedly, some of the encounters will serve as punctums that pierce our consciousness and allow us to realize, if only for a moment, that the relationships we have, or are having, with the space is something that's important and ripe for our consideration. A punctum can never be manufactured. It pierces, or it does not. Like this, meanings cannot necessarily be attributed to a space. Like the Michigan train station, which beckoned to draw the city. The city did not answer. The meaning was attempted to be given to the area. But the meaning never materialized. In examining photographs, Rice notes that certain buildings showed up in all of the images. While perhaps it is too simplistic to say that any one place just appears as an image, as humans, We respond to icons. That which is striking strikes. People visit the Grand Canyon not just because it is a beautiful hole, but because others have had the experience, and this allows for a commonality of experience among people. We like to spread things around. We like to share. Rice cites Vitanza to point out that hyperbole can be used to jab against dominant views of things. For this reason, many of the examples that Rice uses are those which are somewhat extraordinary, like those of Ted Nugent, MC5, and the like thereof. Though there are many other stories to be told, these are the squeaky wheels, the icons, the things from which punctums can be more commonly drawn. Though the majority is major, it is not necessarily supreme. Considerations of the extremes seem to be fruitful in this sense. Rice cites Ulmer saying that electronic learning is more like discovery than proof. As we go through these different processes, in experiencing space or whatnot, we find ideas, we uncover things, and we can't prove it, but somehow it just is. It's a concept, it's a way of being, like a network, a way of looking at something completely differently, a way to talk about Detroit without rehashing the old grand narrative of destruction and doom and gloom. Networks give us the opportunity to talk about things anew, things about change, things about relationships.